Welcome, friend, to Dream Bites, a podcast where the magic of storytelling meets the power of imagination. Each episode is a warm invitation to explore a world unlike any other, carefully crafted to transport you to new realms of wonder. So, find a cozy spot, settle in, and let the friendly voice of our narrator be your guide on this exciting adventure. And now, dear listener, it's time to embark on today's delightful story.
The Revolution That Never Was. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Shadows. The smoke-laden streets of occupied Boston clung to Benjamin Hale like a second skin as he hurried through the twilight, his face obscured by the brim of his tricorn hat. The young lawyer's heart raced, not from exertion, but from the weight of the secret he carried. The clandestine meeting he had stumbled upon earlier that day played on an endless loop in his mind, the whispered words of revolution echoing in his ears. Benjamin's hand instinctively reached for the pocket watch that had once belonged to his grandfather, a habit he had developed when deep in thought. As his fingers brushed against the cool metal, he recalled the fervour in the eyes of the Liberty Shadows, the secret society that had unwittingly drawn him into their circle. Their passionate commitment to the cause of freedom had ignited a spark within him, one that he had long suppressed under the weight of British oppression. Growing up in a middle-class family, Benjamin had always been acutely aware of the injustices that plagued the colonies. His father, a merchant, had often spoken of the burden of British taxes and the stifling grip of the Crown on their lives. Yet, despite his own misgivings, Benjamin had chosen the path of least resistance, focusing on his studies and building a career as a lawyer. He had convinced himself that change could be achieved through the proper channels, through reason and diplomacy. But now, as he navigated the treacherous streets of his occupied city, Benjamin began to question the wisdom of his passive approach. The words of the Liberty Shadows, their unwavering conviction in the face of overwhelming odds, had struck a chord deep within him. Lost in his musings, Benjamin nearly collided with a red-coated British soldier patrolling the streets. He mumbled an apology and hurried on, his heart hammering against his ribs. The close call served as a stark reminder of the ever-present danger that lurked in the shadows of the occupied city. As Benjamin approached his modest home, he caught sight of a familiar figure waiting in the dim light of the street lamp. Eleanor Smythe, the fiery-eyed young woman who had first introduced him to the Liberty Shadows, stepped forward to greet him. "Benjamin," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We must speak." Benjamin ushered her inside, his mind reeling with questions. Once the door was securely closed, Eleanor fixed him with an intense gaze. "Your words at the meeting today," she began. "They carried weight. The others took notice." Benjamin felt a flush of pride at her words, but it was tempered by a growing sense of unease. "I spoke from the heart," he said, "but I fear I may have overstepped." Eleanor shook her head, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "On the contrary, your passion is exactly what we need. Your oratory skills, your knowledge of the law, they could be invaluable to our cause." Benjamin hesitated, the gravity of her words sinking in. To join the Liberty Shadows would mean risking everything he had worked for, potentially putting his family and friends in danger. And yet, the allure of fighting for something greater than himself, of standing up against the injustice that had long plagued the colonies, was undeniable. "I need time," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "To think, to consider the implications." Eleanor nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Of course. But remember, Benjamin, the wheels of revolution are already in motion. The question is, will you be a part of shaping our destiny, or will you watch from the sidelines as history unfolds?" With those words, she slipped out into the night, leaving Benjamin alone with his thoughts. As he stood in the silence of his home, the young lawyer knew that his life had irrevocably changed. The decision that lay before him would not only determine his own fate, but could also alter the course of a nation. Benjamin's mind raced with the possibilities and the perils that lay ahead. He thought of his father's stories, of the countless injustices that had gone unanswered. He thought of the faces of the Liberty Shadows, the fire in their eyes as they spoke of a future free from the yoke of British rule. And in that moment, Benjamin knew that he could no longer stand idly by. The path before him was fraught with danger, but it was also a path that could lead to something greater, something worth fighting for. In the shadows of occupied Boston, a new chapter was about to begin, and Benjamin Hale found himself standing on the precipice of a revolution that could change everything. With a deep breath and a resolute heart, he took the first step towards an uncertain future, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Chapter 2. The Price of Resistance. Benjamin's heart pounded as he manoeuvred through the crowded gathering of British officials, his senses heightened, attuned to every hushed conversation and furtive glance. The weight of his first espionage mission for the Liberty Shadows settled heavily upon his shoulders, a constant reminder of the perilous path he had chosen. As he navigated the sea of redcoats, a whirlwind of emotions surged through him: fear, exhilaration, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. Eleanor's parting words echoed in his mind, a lifeline amidst the chaos. "Remember, the information you gather tonight could be the key to our success. But above all, stay safe." Her concern, mingled with an unwavering determination, had both comforted and unsettled him, a reminder of the high stakes at play. Benjamin's attention snapped back to the present as he caught snippets of a conversation between two high-ranking officers. They spoke of troop movements and supply lines, their voices low and urgent. With a steady hand, he committed the details to memory, each morsel of intelligence a small victory in the face of overwhelming odds. As the evening wore on, Benjamin's nerves began to fray, the constant fear of discovery a palpable weight upon his chest. Each passing moment increased the risk of exposure, and the consequences of being caught played out in vivid detail in his mind's eye. Just as he was about to make his retreat, a familiar voice cut through the din, sending a chill down his spine. "Ah, Mr. Hale," Governor Worthington drawled, his piercing gaze settling on Benjamin. "I didn't expect to see you here among us loyalists." Benjamin's heart raced, his mouth dry as he forced a smile. "Governor Worthington," he managed, bowing his head slightly, "I find it beneficial to stay informed on the matters of our fair city." Worthington's eyes narrowed, suspicion etched in every line of his face. "Indeed. One can never be too careful these days, what with whispers of rebellion on the wind." The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air between them, and Benjamin felt the weight of Worthington's gaze bearing down upon him. He knew he was treading on dangerous ground, but retreat was not an option. "Rebellion is a fool's errand," Benjamin said, meeting Worthington's gaze with a practiced sincerity, even as his heart threatened to burst from his chest. "I have faith in the strength and stability of the British Crown." Worthington studied him for what felt like an eternity, before a thin smile spread across his lips. "Well said, Mr. Hale. See that you keep that faith close to your heart. These are treacherous times, and loyalty is a rare commodity." With a final, pointed look, Worthington melted back into the crowd, leaving Benjamin to release the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The close call served as a stark reminder of the ever-present danger that dogged his every step, the razor's edge upon which he now walked. Later that night, as Benjamin relayed the gathered intelligence to the Liberty Shadows, the adrenaline of the mission gave way to a creeping sense of unease. The success of the evening was a double-edged sword, fueling his commitment to the cause, while also highlighting the immense personal risk he had undertaken. The lies, the deception, the constant fear of discovery, they all weighed heavily upon him, a burden he had never imagined he would bear. Eleanor pulled him aside, her eyes searching his face, concern etched in every line. "You did well tonight," she said softly, "but I can see the toll it's taking on you." Benjamin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I knew the risks when I joined the cause, but the reality of it all is starting to sink in. The constant fear, the moral dilemmas, it's a heavy burden to bear." Eleanor placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her touch a balm to his frayed nerves. "You're not alone in this, Benjamin. We're all fighting the same battle, each in our own way. And though the road ahead may be treacherous, we must hold fast to our convictions. Together, we can weather any storm." As Benjamin left the meeting, Eleanor's words echoed in his mind, a glimmer of light amidst the darkness. He knew that the price of resistance would be high, but he also knew that the cost of inaction was far greater. With each passing day, the lines between his old life and his new purpose blurred a little more, and Benjamin found himself wondering just how much he would be willing to sacrifice in the name of freedom. In the long, sleepless hours of the night, Benjamin grappled with the weight of his choices. The strain on his relationships, the constant fear of exposure, the moral dilemmas that plagued his every decision, they all converged in a maelstrom of doubt and uncertainty. And yet, beneath it all, the flicker of hope still burned, a stubborn ember that refused to be extinguished. For better or worse, Benjamin Hale had chosen his path, and he knew there could be no turning back. The price of resistance was high, but it was a price he was willing to pay for the sake of a future worth fighting for. Chapter 3. The Unraveling Web. Benjamin's heart raced as he crouched in the shadows of the British supply depot, his fingers trembling as he fumbled with the flint and steel. The Liberty Shadows had tasked him with sabotaging the shipment, a crucial blow to the enemy's resources. But as the sparks finally caught, igniting the oil-soaked rags, a shout pierced the night air. "Halt! In the name of the king!" Benjamin bolted, his legs pumping as he wove through the labyrinth of crates and barrels. The sound of pursuit echoed behind him, the clatter of boots against cobblestones growing louder with each passing second. He turned a corner, his lungs burning, only to find himself face to face with a dead end. In that moment, as the British soldiers closed in, Benjamin's life flashed before his eyes. The faces of his family, his friends, the life he had built, all of it hung in the balance. With a final, desperate surge of energy, he scrambled up the wall, his fingers finding purchase in the rough brick. Bullets whizzed past his head as he tumbled over the other side, hitting the ground hard. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but he pushed himself to his feet, staggering into the darkness. He didn't stop running until the shouts faded into the distance, until the only sound was the pounding of his own heart. The close call left Benjamin shaken, the reality of the danger he faced crashing over him like a cold wave. In the days that followed, he moved through his life in a daze, jumping at every shadow, every unexpected noise. Governor Worthington's increased efforts to crush the rebellion only amplified the sense of impending doom, the noose tightening around the necks of the Liberty Shadows. Tensions within the group reached a boiling point when Eleanor confronted Benjamin, her eyes flashing with a mixture of concern and frustration. "You're distracted," she accused, her voice low and urgent. "If you can't keep your head in the game, you're a liability to us all." Benjamin bristled at her words, his own doubts and fears bubbling to the surface. "You think I don't know that?" he snapped. "I'm risking everything for this cause, but sometimes I wonder if it's worth the price we're paying." Eleanor's expression softened, her hand coming to rest on Benjamin's arm. "We're all struggling with the weight of our choices," she said softly. "But we can't let fear paralyze us. The stakes are too high." As the days turned into weeks, Benjamin grappled with the realization that the path to freedom was paved with difficult compromises, that the line between right and wrong was often blurred. He watched as some of his fellow Liberty Shadows grew more radical in their methods, their passion edging into fanaticism. One such member was James Thompson, a fiery-tempered blacksmith whose family had been torn apart by British oppression. James had always been vocal about his desire for more aggressive tactics, but as the pressure mounted, his rhetoric took on a darker tone. "We need to send a message," he argued during one heated meeting, "one they can't ignore, one written in blood, if necessary." Benjamin recoiled at the suggestion, but he couldn't deny the growing unease in the pit of his stomach. Were they becoming the very thing they sought to destroy? Were they losing sight of the ideals that had brought them together in the first place? And always, in the back of his mind, the spectre of Governor Worthington loomed, a constant reminder of the forces arrayed against them. The British grip on the colonies tightened with each passing day, the hope of a peaceful resolution slipping further out of reach. In the quiet moments, when the weight of it all threatened to crush him, Benjamin clung to the belief that their cause was just, that the sacrifices they made would not be in vain. But as the web of lies and secrets grew ever more tangled, as the price of resistance climbed ever higher, He couldn't help but wonder if there would be anything left of himself when the dust finally settled. The unraveling had begun, and Benjamin Hale stood at the center of the storm, a pawn in a game far larger than he had ever imagined. In the shadows of occupied Boston, the echoes of a muted revolution grew louder, and the young lawyer found himself teetering on the edge of an abyss, the fate of a nation hanging in the balance. Chapter 4: The Unbearable Weight of Choice. Benjamin stared at the letter in his trembling hands, the words blurring before his eyes. Penned in Eleanor's unmistakable hand, the revelation shook him to his core. A faction within the Liberty Shadows had been plotting to assassinate Governor Worthington, and they were set to carry out their plan within days. As the weight of the revelation sank in, Benjamin felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The idea of taking a life, even that of a tyrant like Worthington, went against everything he believed in. And yet, as he read Eleanor's impassioned words, he could feel the pull of her conviction, the seductive whisper of a chance to strike a decisive blow against British rule. Seeking answers, Benjamin confronted Eleanor in the Liberty Shadows' hidden meeting place. "Tell me it isn't true," he pleaded. "Tell me you're not planning to murder a man in cold blood." Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly. "It's not murder, Benjamin. It's justice. Worthington is the embodiment of everything we're fighting against. His death would be a rallying cry for the revolution." Benjamin shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "And what happens then? Do you really believe that one man's death will magically set us free? That the British won't retaliate with all the force of an empire scorned?" Eleanor's expression softened, her hand resting on Benjamin's cheek. "I know it's a heavy burden to bear," she said softly, "but sometimes extreme measures are necessary for the greater good." In the days that followed, Benjamin threw himself into his work, desperately searching for an alternative. He uncovered evidence suggesting Governor Worthington had been secretly communicating with moderates, exploring the possibility of a peaceful resolution. If this information could be brought to light, perhaps the tide could be turned without bloodshed. As the appointed hour of the assassination drew near, Benjamin stood before the assembled Liberty Shadows, his voice trembling with emotion. He revealed the evidence he had uncovered, painting a picture of a future where freedom could be won without the stain of innocent blood. Eleanor's eyes flashed with anger and betrayal. "You would have us throw away our one chance at victory?" she demanded. "You would have us bow and scrape before our oppressors, begging for scraps of freedom?" Benjamin met her gaze, his own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I would have us fight for a revolution that we can be proud of," he said softly, "one that doesn't require us to sacrifice our own humanity." Amidst the chaos, James Thompson, the fiery-tempered blacksmith, stepped forward, his voice booming. "The lad's right," he said, to the surprise of all. "If we resort to murder, we're no better than the tyrants we seek to overthrow. There must be another way." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered shadows, and in that moment, a flicker of hope ignited in Benjamin's heart. The assassination plot was abandoned, but the cost was high. The Liberty Shadows fractured, some feeling betrayed, others clinging to the hope of a better path. As Benjamin walked the streets of Boston, the weight of his choice heavy upon his shoulders, he knew that his decision would haunt him. The path to freedom was a winding one, fraught with difficult choices and unintended consequences. But even in the darkest of moments, Benjamin held fast to the belief that hope was not lost, that the dream of a nation built on the principles of liberty and justice was still worth fighting for, no matter the cost. With each step, he carried the weight of that dream, a flicker of light in the shadows of a revolution that never was. Chapter 5: The Echoes of a Muted Revolution. Benjamin stood before Governor Worthington, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of his decision pressed down upon him, the fate of the revolution hanging in the balance. "Governor," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within, "I come to you with a warning and a plea. There are those within the city who plot against your life, who would see you dead in the name of freedom." Worthington's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his sword. "And why, pray tell, should I trust the word of a known associate of the Liberty Shadows?" Benjamin met his gaze unflinchingly, the truth spilling from his lips. Because I believe that a different path is possible, one that doesn't require bloodshed and destruction. Your correspondence with the moderates suggests that you too seek a peaceful resolution. The governor's expression shifted, surprise mingling with suspicion. You've been spying on me. I have, Benjamin admitted, but only because I believe that the information could change the course of our struggle. If the people knew that there was a chance for dialogue, for compromise, perhaps the tide of revolution could be stemmed. Worthington was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching Benjamin's face. And what of your friends in the Liberty Shadows? Will they be so eager to abandon their dreams of glory? Benjamin's heart clenched at the thought of Eleanor, of the betrayal that would undoubtedly shine in her eyes. They will not understand, he said softly, but I must do what I believe is right, even if it means sacrificing everything I hold dear. In the end, the assassination plot was thwarted, the information passed on to the authorities. The Liberty Shadows were disbanded, their members scattered to the winds. Some, like Eleanor, disappeared into the shadows, their fates unknown. Others, like Benjamin, found themselves adrift in a world turned upside down. In the aftermath, Benjamin walked the streets of Boston, a pariah to both sides of the conflict. The British saw him as a traitor, a turncoat who had betrayed his own. The revolutionaries cursed his name, branding him a coward who had sold out their cause. And yet, even in his darkest moments, Benjamin clung to the belief that he had made the right choice, that the path to true freedom lay not in violence and bloodshed, but in the slow, painful work of building bridges and finding common ground. As he sat in his lonely room, the echoes of a muted revolution ringing in his ears, Benjamin took out a quill and began to write. He wrote of his experiences, of the hard lessons learned and the price of his convictions. He wrote of the need for unity, for understanding, for a vision of a future where all men could stand together as equals. And as the ink flowed across the page, Benjamin felt a flicker of hope kindling in his heart. The road ahead would be long and arduous, the scars of the conflict slow to heal, but perhaps in the telling of his story, others might find the courage to take up the mantle of change, to fight for a revolution not of blood and fire, but of hearts and minds. Epilogue. In the years that followed, the legacy of Benjamin Hale's actions continued to ripple through the colonies. Governor Worthington, shaken by the revelation of the assassination plot and the proof of moderate sentiment, began to seek a more conciliatory approach to colonial relations. Though the path was fraught with setbacks and challenges, the seeds of dialogue and compromise had been planted. Eleanor Smythe, after a period of soul-searching, emerged from the shadows to become a voice for a new kind of revolution, one that sought change through education, through the power of ideas and the written word. She and Benjamin, though their paths diverged, remained connected by the unbreakable bond of their shared experiences. And as the smoke of revolution faded, as the wounds of a generation began to heal, the name of Benjamin Hale was spoken not with derision, but with a quiet reverence. For in the end, his sacrifice, his unwavering commitment to the ideals of liberty and justice, had lit a spark that would guide the colonies towards a brighter future. In the smoke-laden streets of Boston, a new chapter was beginning, one that would be written not in the annals of history, but in the lives of those who dared to dream of a better world. And Benjamin Hale, the unlikely hero of a revolution that never was, would forever be remembered as a beacon of hope, a guiding light in the darkness of a tumultuous age. The end.
And there you have it, dear listener. Another enchanting journey brought to life by the magic of storytelling. We hope that this tale has sparked your imagination and left you with a sense of wonder. As we close this chapter, remember that there's always another story waiting to be discovered. So keep your sense of curiosity alive and join us again for the next episode of Dream Bites. Until then, may your own adventures be filled with the same excitement and delight as the ones we've shared here. And always remember, the power of imagination knows no bounds. Thank you for being a part of the Dream Bites story. See you next time.
Close your eyes, let your mind ignite. The universe of stories shine.